everybody. Welcome back to Out of Left Field. I'm your host, Abby Alonzo, and we're doing things a little bit different today. If you've watched the episodes before this, you've seen a lot of players, maybe some coaches come through. But today, we're going to talk to somebody who is on the front lines of helping grow softball from a media perspective. I'm thrilled to announce that Savanna Collins is here with us today. She is one of the best storytellers. You've probably seen her around if you've watched anything related to AUSL, and she's doing God's work for the sport. As somebody in media, I can't tell you how much I appreciate everything you're doing for the game and how excited I am to learn from you today.
Oh my gosh, what an intro. Thanks. I'm always excited to talk softball at any time and appreciate you, branching out and having me on. Glad to be here.
Yeah, we're obviously going to talk softball, right? The whole podcast is about softball, but I do want people to get to know you and like what goes into everything that you're doing, because it's not easy work, especially being involved in growing a league that, is, I want to say, in the ground stages of really trying to become something monumental for softball. Yeah. So let's backtrack a little bit and talk about how you got into sports media and why.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm a coach's kid. Yeah. I'm like that. That is like, I grew up in a gym. My dad's been a basketball coach or an athletic director my whole life. My grandfather, he's right here behind me. He played Major League Baseball too. So like sports was life, And
Yeah.
so when it came to the media side, I like to say like I made my TV debut in 4th grade because I was our elementary school's weather girl. They had a whole production. And so I did that like 4th, 5th grade. It was really big growing up in Florida. So I did it in middle school. And then in high school, I went to a school that, if you've seen Friday Night Lights, like that was my high school. I went to Lakeland. We had a Jumbotron turf field, played in a stadium, and we had a live show of our games. And so I was just like, hey, is there any way I can be involved in this? I do like to do TV stuff. And they're like, yeah, do you want to be our sideline reporter for the games? And I was like, sure, I'll do it. And I genuinely remember my first game when the red light came on, and I was like, oh, that's it. That's exactly what I want to do. Because I knew, like, I wasn't really having big dreams to be a pro, basketball player, definitely not having any dreams to be a pro softball player. And so I was like, this is what I love. I love sports. I love coaches and players, but I love storytelling. And that's what did it for me. And so that was kind of like the moment at 14. I know it's crazy to know what you want to do, but I knew. I was like, that's who I'm going to be.
I can relate to you here. And I think a lot of women in sports share that kind of same, like, that love for sport. And I have talked about this so many times. Like, actually, when I was younger, I fully wanted to be the first female NFL player. And my dad let it ride for a little bit because transparently, I watched my dad. Ooh, we're going to get deep right off the bat. Let's go.
Love it.
My dad had cancer when I was in 7th grade, I believe. And when he was going through chemo, he didn't do much else other than get up and go coach my brother's football team. And like, I'm watching this 6'4", 250 guy shrink down to 180, but he managed to get up every day to go coach those kids through chemo. And I think at a young age, I realized the power of sport and, being able to show up for other people and leave an impact. And, you learn so much through winning and losing and learning how to work with other people that I think that's where my love for sport came from. But I can relate to being in media and like, you just know like that there is a moment where, you just feel it and you're like, this is what my purpose is. I'm supposed to storytell about sports. And so I was joking about, I told my dad I wanted to be the first NFL player and he let it ride. And then as I got older, he was like, hey, baby, biologically, it's probably not going to work out. Like maybe something else. And I was like, okay, if I can't play, I'm going to be as close to the game as I possibly can. And my route was more football. Just that's how I grew up down in South Louisiana. I played softball, but when I was younger, I didn't really see professional softball. I never thought that we would be in the position that we're in today.
Me either.
You had the greats, but like it didn't seem like a viable route. So I kind of want to pivot that to how you ended up in softball specifically. because it wasn't always a mainstream sport, and we're still working towards that. But you are really laying groundwork for this sport to take off. So, how did you get into softball specifically?
Well, thank you. And let me just say, your dad sounds like an incredible person. And
He's
coaches'
awesome.
kids were built different. Like they make us so different. And when you hear those little conversations, I'm sure your dad had when it came to football, whether it was with players or at home, like you get ingrained in that. And like I craved that.
Yeah.
And so what kind of led me to softball, even though, my dad was a basketball coach, was, I grew up in Florida. So again, like in the South, that was really the biggest game that most girls played if you played anything competitively. Same, and I know
Right.
in Louisiana too. And my older cousin played, and anything she did, I essentially wanted to do too. And so
Yep.
I got started at a young age and just like loved it. It was so fun, having my grandfather who played Major League Baseball. That was a big point of like feeling connected to him. Just somebody who
Yes.
played that game too. And so I just kind of stuck around in the sport. Kind of never really thought it was going to be my career path, though. I went to the
Yeah.
University of Florida, covered Gator football, covered Gator baseball's national championship run, and at no point were honestly women's sports really on my radar. But after college, I got a call to if I wanted to go down to Melbourne, Florida, and cover the Pride, who was in the National Pro Fast Pitch League,
Yep.
now defunct. But I was like, yeah, I love softball. I played my whole life. Like, I understand the game. I'll just go down there. It ended up being my first job out of college. I spent years there working in the NPF and with that organization. And I remember always thinking when I was there, like, for me to advance in my career, to have bigger opportunities, to make more money, I was going to have to leave softball. Like, that was kind of a given during that
Yeah.
time. And then Athletes Unlimited launched. And I remember seeing it on my phone, turning to my coworker and going, I don't know what this is, but I have to work here. And so I essentially just banged down the door until someone gave me a job. Because I was like, hey, you need somebody in softball. I'm pretty much the only reporter in this
Yep.
league. So who you want it to be? And it worked out. And as AU has grown and now transitioned to the AUSL, I've got to grow with it. And I could have never imagined that I would stay in pro softball and have these opportunities, this career path, and even just being taken care of. The AUSL takes care of their players, but they really take care of their people. That's why I've worked there. I'm going into my 6th season,
Mm.
working here. And so you never really know like what that path is going to be, but people always ask me all the time, like, do you want to transition and do other things? And I do, and it's fun. But like at this point, I'm like, I think this is exactly where I'm supposed to be. I can't imagine not doing this. So it's special. I'm
Yeah.
grateful to the game for that. I know players and coaches talk about being, giving back to the game, giving to the game. I'm like, the game has given me a lot. And I didn't play beyond high school, and that's okay, So it's
Yep.
just funny how I hear that. And I'm like, I relate to that just in a very different way.
Yes, yes, I'm right there with you. I I want to know, like, you quite literally have been in it. You're in it. You're in it every day between going from AU to AUSL. You've watched this transition happen. What is that perspective for you? What have you seen that has, led us to this ESPN deals and sold out stadiums and city-based teams? Like, what is happening behind the scenes that is leading to this explosion in the AUSL?
Yeah, I think what's different, right now with the AUSL than anything I've ever been a part of, NPF and, when we play what was AU Pro Softball, now they've branded it as the All-Star Cup, is like everybody is on board. So I remember, when Jennie Finch became involved, Lisa Fernandez was, on our advisory committee and now is one of our GMs, Kat Osterman, like all those names and people haven't all been in the same room at the same time. And that to me
Mm-hmm.
was the initial difference maker, because for those people, Natasha Watley too, like that was kind of our crew that launched the AUSL, as advisors. Then some of them, shifted into bigger roles like Coach Fernandez. But, that was the start of having their legitimacy and their names attached. And then I think the second stage was, our commissioner, Kim Ing. She has been our game changer, because of her vision and her experience working in Major League Baseball, the respect that she has way outside of softball. that is another level for us. I remember when
Yep.
Kim came on, knowing like, okay, we're cooking with fire now. Like we really got it going. And then now the partnership with MLB, that was the piece where I was like, man, we're doing things we've never been able to reach before in the sport, back to when I joined it and before, and so that's, I think, kind of the key people in the room, the right backing. And then I do think, it being the right time too, like the progress that's been made at the grassroots level in the college game. And there's been people like Lisa Fernandez and Jennie Finch and Kat who played when, they weren't making any money and they were doing all these crazy road trips, trying to take the game places. But now with everybody there, it's time. And I think we're even impacted by other pro leagues, like the success of the WNBA and the success of the NWSL. I kind of look at the AUSL and I look outside of this and I go like, anybody involved in this has hit the jackpot. Like this is the next big women's sports league. If you're not on board, like what are you doing? And I think people are getting to that point when they see the success of softball. So I think it's a lot of those people. Jennie said it at one of our very first events, everybody is in the same boat, rowing in the same direction at the same time. And that'll do it.
Yep. That collaboration and the cohesion of everybody pulling on the same end of the rope. And I want to say, you talked about Kim Ings being respected. And one of the things that I noticed whenever I came to Michigan, and DJ, is not with the Yankees anymore, DJ LeMahieu, for Savanna and I were talking before. DJ actually invested in this studio. And, he's coming out of Major League Baseball for the first time in God knows how long. And I told him about the AUSL, and he had heard of it, but he didn't really know what was going on. And the moment that I said, some of the names, and I was like, Kim Ings, the commissioner, the turn and the respect from a 14-year big leaguer, MLB All-Star, the way that he looked at me and he quite literally went, oh yeah, that's good. That'll do it. And I was like, the power that her name holds with the best athletes in the world, that's why people can get on board. And it's not just her, but all of the women that you just mentioned, just all being in the same room, working towards the same goal. That's why we're seeing the success. And to be around women like that who were laying the foundation when they weren't reaping the benefits, when they were doing it for very little money and very little, flowers, honestly, to see the full circle moment of those are the same women that are in the room creating opportunity for the players that are playing now, all the way down to the 7-year-olds that are just starting softball. What does that mean to you to be able to work with women like that?
Yeah, I have a lot of moments where I'm like, I can't believe I'm in this room. I can't believe like I know them, which, at this point it is beginning to feel, more like peers and colleagues, but I'm definitely the type of person that I always take a step back and will appreciate a moment. I think, for some of them, I covered their careers, so I covered the end of Kat's pro career. So that was funny, for me to go from like a player reporter relationship, now to more player friend, player GM, so that's different. And so, but, with people like Jennie, like Natasha, like Lisa, I try to soak up everything they say. There are things that, they share or talk about in their experiences where I'm like, do not forget that. Like, write that down. Tell somebody about that after. But I especially felt that with Kim. And, I've shared this with her that like most of my career as a broadcaster in softball, even just in sports, I really haven't had a ton of one-on-one hands-on time with a really strong woman leader and like executive. And being around Kim has really changed what that looks like because I didn't know. And I've told her, like, in the time that I've spent traveling with her, when we talk about softball or just, sometimes talk about baseball and sports, like, I'm like, this is the first time I'm really getting to be around someone of her caliber. And then add on that, she's a woman and a trailblazer and the first female GM in the United States. So it's like, and it's making me dream much bigger than I've ever dreamed. And that's been fun. So like, I think about how a lot of my career, I was like, I would just love to be a sideline reporter. That's all I wanted to do. And then now it's become, okay, I would like to be a top respected reporter. Okay, we're dreaming bigger. Okay, I think I want a show. And now it's become like, okay, maybe later in my career, I could work in a front office or I could work in the commissioner's office. That had never crossed my mind until this year because I've never seen them. Like, I'm around Kat and Jenny Dalton Hill and Lisa Fernandez and Kirk Walker, our GM of the Spark, like all these names. And I'm like, I'd never been around these people to see them and go, okay, I want to work for you. I want to do that. And I'm not leaving this job anytime soon, but that's the effect. What does it feel like to be around them? You're like, I have been dreaming way too small. But you really do sometimes have to see it. To be able to start to think bigger. So that's been really fun for me personally in the past year to go, okay, I could do more than just this, or I could transition and pivot. So that's been new.
I love that so much because, like I said, I've talked to a lot of players, and we've talked a lot about fitting in a box, that you're more than the athlete you are on the field. Like, there are other qualities. You don't have to be this one identity. And I love that you said it, because we're not athletes, but we're in that world. And it's so easy, especially as women in sports, to try to fit in a box.
Totally.
We're perceived every time we're on a camera, right? And it's hard not to kind of lose your identity when you have to be somebody on camera, or this personality, or whatever it is. And to hear you say that being around women like that has allowed you to dream bigger of, oh, I can do this and that if I want to. And I just talked to Georgina Korick last week about this, of identity. She was incredible. But about identity and not being tethered to your job, so to speak. And it's really cool to hear that from a non-athlete perspective. That same rule applies of, you can dream bigger. You can be more than the sideline reporter for the AUSL. That's great. That is an accomplishment in itself.
Sure.
But do more. You can do more. You can do more. And I do want to say, like, again, I've said it, but everything that you're doing, like, especially for me, like, I started with the creator program in the AUSL, and a few months later I have a podcast in a studio, and I never thought that I would be here. But seeing women like you, like, trailblaze in the media world, especially in softball, like, that lights me up of like, cool, like, looks like this path wasn't paved before, but she found a way and she's doing a hell of a job. I can do something similar too. So you're leaving an impact on a lot of people, and I can say that from experience.
Thank you.
My brain,
that means
of course,
the world.
My brain is going now, because I just want to pick yours and learn from the sports media side. I remember when I was younger, not necessarily knowing how to get into it. I knew I wanted to do it, but I didn't know what to do. So I found myself working in summer baseball and NFL press boxes. I was doing anything and everything. And now, as I move through my career, I have a lot of younger women ask me the same thing of, where do I start? Should I do this? What do I do? And I catch myself kind of being like, try everything. I don't really know. I don't have an instruction manual for you. I can help you along, but you really got to network and just, take opportunities as they come. When younger women ask you that question, what is your answer? How do I get into this?
Yeah, I've tried to start answering that question a little bit more practically, because I remember I would ask that and was very frustrated by the answers, because I would hear, just get involved. It's all about who you know, and make sure you network. I was like, I don't know what to do with any of that. That is not helpful. I understand why that's why they say that, but give me some examples. And so, the thing that I would say to people going into college is like, find the opportunity for you to get a lot of reps, and I love to say it now. And now that I know this, is like, the pathway in women's sports is wide open. It's a lot easier to get access, great stories, one-on-one conversations with players and coaches at major institutions than everybody fighting to want to be on the football beat. And I was on the football beat. So like, it's no knock to it, but there are avenues for your career to be able to take off quicker and differently. It doesn't have to be traditional. So that's kind of the first thing I like to tell people, whether that's on campus or, in a program. I started in high school and it paid off. And so, and everything can be done on your phone now. Like, you can create your own reps. When I was in high school covering these games, I wish, it would have been bigger to do this on social media than it was at the time, but like, get a little mic set and interview the players at your school after the game, interview coaches. Like, it's so easy now to get to build that brand, or even just start to build comfortability. Even if it doesn't go anywhere, that's kind of a starting point. You just got to get out there and do it. And then I think the second part for that too, and this is for women specifically, is you have to have a bigger tool set than being a sideline reporter. And it's a must. Like, if you cannot be like tunnel visioned on that. And if that's what you want to do, that's awesome. But you need to be able to edit, possibly make graphics. Can you shoot video? What about photography? Here's my next one. And I wish somebody would have shook me and told me this. Get in the booth and do play-by-play.
Oh my gosh.
Get in there. Why are you not doing play-by-play? Everybody wants a woman who can do play-by-play right now. At the college level, at the pro level. Like, that's a part of my career that's starting probably 8 years late. I'm going to be doing some play-by-play consistently this spring, and I want to kick myself. Yeah, I'm excited, but I'm nervous. And I wish I would have been doing that. So that's kind of my other one, is you got to be able to do a lot of different things, because sideline alone is not going to pay the bills for a long time. And that's, it's really hard. And sideline doesn't pay my bills. I write, I'm a reporter for our website. That's my job. The sideline stuff is on the side and for fun and extra. But you got to have some hard, skill set outside of doing that. And, the last one, and I think a lot of people talk about, of like, it's all about who you know. And that's true. But, something I've experienced a lot in my career is all of my big opportunities and my breaks have not necessarily come from these big executives at ESPN and networks and things like that. It's come from my peers. One of my friends in class in college, he's the voice of Gators softball right now. He's who helped me get my play-by-play opportunities throughout, the outside of the AUSL season. And like, my friends are the people who have helped me get to do things, and then I try and pay it back to them. So I think sometimes when people hear networking, they want to know, the who crews for ESPN and stuff. And half the time, it's the people that you know and have invested in. And so, like, don't lose sight of helping those people out, because they will help you out too. And like, my career is where it is, not because of some big executive giving me a break, but my peers have given me a break time and time again. So those are kind of my three things. I'm like, you can do it. Here's who can help you. And like, here's how you need to be thinking. So that's kind of my three part that I try and give to people, of like, maybe one of these will help you get started.
Absolutely. If you are trying to go into sports media, or if you're a woman trying to go into sports media, I hope you took notes just now. The reps, as overwhelming as it can be with social media, like, it's a tough job to run social media because it's nonstop. But the opportunity has never been bigger, because there's content everywhere. There are opportunities everywhere. You can create your own brand. You just have to do it. The other thing is not worry about failure. Some things you're going to do, and it's going to be, I remember my first interview, which I was 16. It was god awful. We filmed it at a game. You can't hear anything. The talking, the hand, it's horrible. But that one interview just started, oh, now I met this person. Oh, I got an email from this. Like, it just starts. So just start and go get the reps. Take it. Do it yourself. Like, don't wait for somebody to give you an opportunity. Like, you have all the tools, and going off of the tools, know how to do all of it. Teach yourself Canva, learn how to edit, learn how lighting works in a studio. Because as much as we would love to say, yep, I'm going to be a sideline reporter for this team, and all I have to do is stand in front of the camera and talk, keep dreaming, because it will very slight chance that will happen.
Yeah.
It is,
and some people it does. Yeah. And like, every now and again it does. But like, for the rest of us, like, that's probably not going to be it, and that's okay. Like, and I think about some of my early failures, like, it's kind of funny now now to kind of be in a job that I'm like, oh, like this is a very desirable job, being in pro softball and on TV and with the AUSL and things like that. But I had jobs that I did not like, and they sucked. um, I,
Okay, yeah.
middle of the summer covering youth travel baseball and running around interviewing 8-year-olds. Like I've been there, man. And it's good. Like it's good that I did that.
You
And
gotta
it
pay your
all,
dues.
yeah. And I really encourage people who are in those jobs, because I remember, even when I think about it, I'm back in that office. That was really a closet. And I'm never getting out of this job. I was like,
Yep.
this is it. My career's never taken off. But like, there are so many ways to skin a cat, and like, there's not a perfect way to make it. And like, now it's funny. I'm like, this life and like job that I have, like, I couldn't even dream of it. Like, it didn't exist. This job didn't
Quite
exist when I
literally.
was in that office. And that's awesome. So it's like, just stay true to it, and don't be afraid to pivot and try new things. But man, I think about some of
Yeah,
those early reps of mine too. I'm like, it's awesome. I'm so glad nobody saw that. Like, fail in private.
right.
You got to fail in private, because the
That,
last thing you want to do is fail when it's big and everybody saw.
yep. I actually do want to talk about failure. Yeah, really. Because it's very easy. There's so much criticism in this job, in this industry. And there are a lot of little details that are easy to skip over, and you're going to fail. That's in
Yeah.
anything. You're going to fail throughout your life. It's never going to stop. You're never going to be perfect at anything you do. But how do you learn from failure? Because I can think of a few times that like I failed bad, like on live broadcasts or whatever, hosting a live event. And it was like a moment of like, I will never recover from this. And those moments now are things that were so vital to my growth in not just this industry, but as a person too.
Yeah.
So when you recall moments of those kind of failures, what do you think you've learned from that, or how has that helped you develop into who you are today?
Yeah. Some of them I come to mind and I think about that. There's one in particular that I didn't respond to, I think, the way that I should have. And I was kind of thrown into calling play by play for one of the Pride games. And I didn't want to do it, but my boss kind of forced me because there was nobody else to do it. And I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how to build a boards. I'd never called a game. I was really nervous. I was in the booth by myself. Like, it was, disaster scenario, and no one saw it. It was on some random streaming website. But I remember it. I remember being on air and falling on my face. And I let that tell me, well, I'm not meant to be a play by play. I'm not meant to
Mm,
do that. And I listened to that very silly failure for a very long time. And I'm finally breaking out of that, because I was like, that wasn't on me. I didn't have somebody mentoring me and showing me or learning. I found out the day before I had to call that game. How could I have been ready
right.
for that? So that's kind of the what not to do. That was a time where I didn't respond to it well. And
Mm,
I'm kind of trying to correct that now. But other times, I've definitely looked at my failures, especially in the moment on TV. Like, if a sideline hit doesn't go my way, or maybe I just don't say it right, or I don't deliver it right, the first thing I'll usually do is kind of take note of like, well, why didn't that go well? Like, did I not have my notes prepared? Was I just a little too scattered? Was I focused on other things? Was I trying to force that story, and kind of look at that first? And then just take a step back and go like, okay, well, if that happened in the third inning, I've got, 5, 6 more to fix it or do better. And so, that's as often, gosh, I hear the players tell me this all the time. Like, you got to be a goldfish, you got to have a short memory. And like, that is something that I have really taken on as a reporter of all things,
hmm
because I'm like, what am I going to do? Let that one, word I mispronounce like ruin my whole game? Like, we could have a walk off,
Right.
and I could have a great interview in 2 hours if I will not, let it get to my head. And so that's kind of some like times I do respond well, and sometimes I haven't. And so it's all a learning experience, and you're going to fail.
Yep.
But I do think that there is a lot of value in not being on too big of a stage too soon. That's something I'm really
Yeah.
thankful for in my career. I feel like I've taken some really incremental steps of like, okay, I did linear TV when I was ready. I did ESPN2 when I was ready. This past summer, we were on ESPN, no extras, just the main channel for the championship, and kind of stepping into that moment. And some, the players know that I'm excited about that, my friends, and they're like, are you nervous? It's like, no, I'm not nervous. I work for this.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm ready.
I'm ready. And that's a good feeling. That's good. And you want to be there if you can.
Yes.
Yeah.
Talk to me
Trust
about
that.
That when you're prepared, how it doesn't feel like nerves. It's like an excitement. There might be a few butterflies, but it's an excitement, like an adrenaline, like I'm ready, let's go. But
Totally.
to be prepared is a huge key to that, right? I want to know, and now I'm curious of like your preparation process, right? There's a lot of information. There's a lot of different players, especially in the league, how it was structured this past summer. You got to know a lot and you got to know it all. So how do you go into a season like that prepared?
Yeah. A lot of it, for me comes down to long-term relationships that I've built. I think about Amanda Lorenz. I watched her very first rookie season in the pros. I don't know if I've ever missed one of her pro at-bats. And at the same time of being there showing up, I'm getting to know her. I'm asking her questions. Like, I'm trying to challenge her and her to challenge me to be ready. And, something that I say, especially early on in my career, and I still do, like go into a coach or a player. This past summer, I did it with Kirk Walker, who was the pitching coach for the Talons. And I said, hey, I'm going to be honest with you. Pitching is the last, kind of part of this game that I feel like I don't have a higher level understanding of. Do you mind if throughout this season I come and ask you some questions that might feel stupid to you, but are important for me? And I did that the year before with catchers. Shout out to Taylor Edwards and Sachel Palacios. I said the same thing to them. I said, help me understand what you do well. And so a little bit of being prepared is in the times before, you got to be ultra vulnerable that you don't know or you need to learn. And that's fine. As long as you're respecting people's process and the game, people don't mind. I don't feel like to answer those questions. And some people really enjoy it. But, when it comes to coming into a game, you just really got to be in tune with, players and listening. So much of my best stories are when I spend a little extra time with someone who maybe doesn't always. My favorite story of the season was Jadlyn Alchin, coming off the reserve player pool. And that story came out of sitting in a coffee shop with her for 2 hours on an off day and listening. And there's a lot of players in softball, the big ones too, that don't feel like their stories have really been told, and giving them an opportunity to share them is where I get my best stuff and why I feel prepared. And then on the, the more nitty gritty side is, a process that I use with my notes and the way that I organize things too. I have a handwritten and a digital version of almost everything to kind of keep it together. But, it's why am I prepared? A lot of it is because of my relationships over the years. Having a good hit in the AUSL championship probably started like 3-4 years prior of being around some of those players, which is funny because it just ends up paying off,
Yeah. I'm glad you brought this up because it wasn't something that I understood when I was younger of what a trusting relationship with athletes looked like. And only over the past 2 years, maybe, I really understood what that was. And it was actually because I was working with baseball players. Before I started the softball thing, I was doing a lot of work with MLB guys and some of the biggest names in baseball. And I saw what a level of trust when you're vulnerable with an athlete and you give them the space to be vulnerable back, what that results in, and that relationship builds because of that level of trust, of vulnerability. And that is special. That takes time to develop. It takes a special kind of person to be able to, make these athletes feel comfortable enough to share those things and to, I want to say like almost confide in you. And we tell the stories and stuff, but there's a level of responsibility on us to be able to tell those stories and do them justice and make sure that that athlete feels like their story was told in a respectful way, in a way that aligns with how they feel and, what they experience. And that is something that does take time. And we were talking about the logistics of how you get into this and how you get good at it. But I think that is something that is so important. And especially today, when we're in a world where attention and views pay, and everybody's quick to want to break news or to, hook people in with whatever it is, the drama, I think that goes unnoticed a lot, or maybe isn't talked about enough, because that is huge. And I can't speak on an athlete's behalf. I can only talk to the side of being in the media and being a trusted resource, so to speak. But from athletes I know that I do have close relationships, they value that. And that has allowed me to then share stories that fans connect with and people love, because it's real and it's truth and it's valid, and it aligns with that player. So I'm really, really glad that you brought that up. And from seeing your work and, how you've formed relationships with the girls and the stories that you've told, it is very clear that you've built that trust with so many of them, and your work shows it. And
Thanks.
I admire it. I know a lot of people do. And that is a big part of why this game is growing. So thank you for talking about the trust level with the athlete.
Yeah, I mean, when people ask me, like, what's the most important thing? Yeah, people ask it a lot, like, oh, what's your biggest skill set? Or sometimes they ask, like, what's the biggest thing you bring to the table? Like, I very boldly say, it's like, it's my trust. Like, I will never, ever betray that. If I, it's the number one thing to me at all times. It's all I have. It's like, sure, I might be a good broadcaster or speak well or tell stories well, but I don't have anything without them. And that goes for the things they tell me in BP, the time they spend with me. And like, I tell them thank you, as often as I can. But like, I want that to be really clear for like reporters, or, maybe people want to do this, is like, oftentimes like your skills can be great, but if you don't have that, you're never, I don't think, really going to do things that are special, because, it's their story. It's not my story. It might be my hit on broadcast, but it's their experiences. And so that's really important. And I'm kind of glad I don't talk about this stuff often, but like, it's very clear to me at all times. I'm like, this is, the biggest thing that I have at any given time, especially in softball. It's that.
I know you said like you feel like you're right where you're supposed to be, and it looks that way from the outside. When you think about 10, 15, 20 years, I mean, you could be in the industry for 30 more years, who knows? When you think about the end of your career, what legacy do you want to leave behind?
Oh my gosh. I ask people that all the time. And like, oh, I don't know.
When you're on the other side, it's like, shit, these questions are hard. I'm on the spot.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I ask that question a lot. That's funny. I think, what do I want my legacy to be in softball? I think I would want it to be that although I didn't play at a high level, that I did understand the game at a high level. It's really important to me that, maybe I wasn't, the best athlete. I didn't play in college, but like, I would really hope that players and staffs and coaches that were around me would say like, she studied her butt off to cover us at a high level. That's really, really important to me. And then I think the other piece would be that like, I just contributed to people being able to understand why it's so special. Like, these women are the most dynamic and funny and interesting people. And then add on, who they are as athletes and their approach and the crazy things they do to get ready. And they're all different and nobody does it the same way. And like, the game is so fun to watch. And the more you understand about it, the better it gets. And I would hope that, 10, 15, 20 years from now, when pro softball specifically, that we are playing in major league softball, that version for us, that people would go like, oh, I found the game, or I liked that player, or I rooted for that team because of maybe some stories that I told, or I just made people feel like they were close to it. I hope people say like, oh, she made me feel like I was close to that, whether it was on TV or reading it or watching it. I think that was probably, in a nutshell, what I would want it to be. Tough question. I got to ease up on that one.
Dude, I'm telling you, sometimes I joke, I'm so glad I'm on this side, because some of the questions that I ask, people are like, why are you doing this to me right now? I can't think. But you get it. You of all people get it. You mentioned that some of these girls are hilarious. And for everyone on here, if you have TikTok, please go follow some of these AUSL players on TikTok or even Instagram, because there was one day I was sitting outside of the Dome and I was getting ready to go in for an interview, and I'm in my little TikTok doom scroll, and because of my location, the algorithm starts pumping AUSL TikToks. Yeah. I kid you not. I was crying laughing for 45 minutes at some of the stuff. I'm like, this is out of pocket, but I love it. It's so real, and this is relatable. It was hysterical. But when you talk about some of these girls and their personalities and, things that they're involved in and stuff, what comes to mind of some of the maybe most memorable personalities or stories that you've encountered?
Oh man. Okay. I think memorable stories and personalities in particular. All right. Let me think. So I think this is too big picture of an answer, but it's kind of comes down to why I think women's sports in particular are just so fantastic to be around.
Oh yeah.
It's, so many of them didn't get to just be the jock. Almost none of them got to just be the jock. And so they are all other things, Peyton Gottschall growing up was a dancer in that crazy dance show that used to be on TV. And Georgina Corrick would be a marine biologist if she wasn't an athlete. And Tori Vidalis is genuinely the funniest person I think I've ever been around. And to me, Megan Faramo is probably the next coming of Kobe Bryant, if you get to really see her process and stuff. And so those are just some really random ones, but none of them are one-dimensional. None of them are just softball players. And I think there's a double side to that. Men's sports and male athletes are allowed to just be that. And that is great for them. It's where their game is, and it's where the game has been in basketball and baseball and football for a very long time. We are not there yet. Do I hope we eventually get there for women's sports? Yes. But I hope we never lose this, that these athletes are so phenomenal and layered, and they're so interesting. And, somebody that does come to mind to me that is so ahead of her time is Sierra Romero. I remember being around her at the first time at the Pride. She was a little bit more of a veteran and the franchise player on the team, and I was fresh out of college, and she absolutely terrified me because being around Sierra is this big league presence that just was more than any male athlete at the University of Florida I had ever been around. And I remember being around Sierra, and I would call my dad, in my first couple weeks on the job, and I'm like, there's this player, everybody calls her Romo, and she is a superstar in how she walks and talks and the eye black and the hair and how she plays. And it's so funny because it's there are versions of that in male athletes. And then, here's her. And she, to me, is just so ahead of her time in terms of what a, female athlete can be, and the presence and the aura. So it's funny because they all exist in a space. So you get to pick your favorite. And that's my favorite part is do you like the underdog or the Kobe Bryant or the one who's kind of crazy and has a few screws loose, or who's fun and funny like Sis Bates and is all about just enjoying it? Take your pick. We have all of it in this league, and we're only 6 teams. So kind of a long-winded answer, but I love the players I'm around. I appreciate them and see them for all the things that they are. And it's my favorite thing to talk about, obviously.
Yeah, I know. And I love that. I feel it through the camera, and I'm sure viewers are going to feel it too. That was the best answer you could have given. You said it was a broader answer, but I think that was the most authentic way to explain what this league is and the power of the women in it. And that analogy of just you're right. you know, and this is not a knock to male athletes at all, but that's how the system's been. Like, you can be the crazy athlete and that can be you, and it
that could be
works.
it.
But like women's sports, it's so layered, and you see that in every individual. And if you're watching this and you have not tuned into the AUSL, please do it. If not for the softball, for the personalities, you will be entertained. I assure you. I can promise you. This was awesome, Savanna. I cannot thank you enough for making time, but also for being so transparent about your role and your path, and you know what this industry looks like. I'll wrap it up here, but what do you hope to see this next year in 2026 with the AUSL?
Yeah, first thing that comes to mind is like packed out home crowds. That was something last year, you know, being in pro softball since 2018, I was nervous because I've covered games where like 150, 200 people are there.
Yep.
And here we are going on this cross country tour. And I'm like, okay, are they gonna come? You know? And then we get to Round Rock and there's 7,000 people there. And I'm like, where did all y'all come from? You know, it was so cool. You're like, where have all of you been? I'm so glad you're here. But I do hope, and I think that's what I'm most looking forward to, and what I think is most important about year 2 for the AUSL, but year 1 in these cities, is having good city connections, you know, showing that this is a viable location and, you know, investment for these communities to come to these games, and starting to create that long-term connection that we've really been missing. So that's what I'm most excited about, is being settled in some places, even though I'm with the league and cover it all. So that's what I'm really excited about. But kind of just to add on, because you've given me a ton of praise and stuff, and I think whenever I get to do these, it's really crazy to me, it's like, I think about, you know, when I started in softball, I didn't have a lot of like counterparts. Like I didn't have a lot of peers. And I remember to get inspo or like, you know, get new ideas, I would have to watch MLB reporters or NFL reporters. And it is really, really neat to me now that I can watch, and I do watch your stuff and think, oh, I never looked at it from that angle. Or, oh, I should have covered that way. And that is so special to me because I am so glad that the room is getting a little bit more crowded. You know, I think about you and, you know, Jenna, the crew at D1 Softball, Brady with Softball, you know, America too, like all of us that are kind of in this little niche group of like, we're the softball people. And that's really special to me because it hasn't always been that way. And I'm really glad you're in the room too. And that's, you know, I don't ever see any of us as like, we're not competitors, like we're all on the same team, but we do compete, and that I think we make each other better. And so I've needed that and wanted that. And so that makes me really excited about year 2. Like, oh man, like we've got, you know, a group of us who cover the league. You know, it's a collective effort. So that makes me really excited about the AUSL 2 outside of the league is our space, the media space. So it's fun.
Yes. It's growing the same way the league is growing. I see more and more softball content coming out, and you know, it's the same thing. We're learning from each other. I do the same exact thing. I'm like, whoa, that was a really good way to do that. Oh, I should try that. Like, you're learning from each other. Like, that is one of the most exciting things of having other people, you know, help build the sport too in their own way and bring their own personality, but like learning from each other. This was awesome.
That makes me excited.
I get excited. Every time I get to do like an interview for softball, I get excited. But I think today I was like kind of giddy. I'm like, oh, I get to learn today and like actually like empathize with, you know, like I played to a certain level, but I'm not a pro anymore. Like I can only empathize with them so much, but like we see each other. So I'm so excited about talking to you today. And I feel like a lot of people will get something out of this. And I say that a lot every week, but it's a different perspective completely. You are incredible. Keep doing what you're doing. If people watch and want to follow along with you, where can they find you?
Yeah, I'm a little bit everywhere. I probably post my work the most consistently on Instagram. I'm at SavvyGo. And that's, you know, usually where you can see my stuff. But please also, you know, I don't plug this as much because I do a lot of TV stuff, but like the AUSL website, we do some really incredible storytelling and it's written. And I'm really proud of the work that we do there with my boss, Alex. And so the AUSL.com, that's us. And that's where you can really dig into like getting to know these players and reading their stories. So that's usually where.
And those feature pieces are awesome. You do an incredible job on camera, off camera, writing. Keep doing what you're doing. You're inspiring me and I'm sure a lot of other people. And I cannot thank you enough.
Thanks. Oh my gosh, loved it. Thanks for having me.